Hello everyone, I am Ritika and I welcome you all to our 22nd LinkedIn Live session on 2020X Vision, Winning Tactics for Enterprise Deals and Sales Excellence. Before we start our session, I request all the participants to please mention their name and their location in the comment section. We're also going to have a panel discussion at the end of the session. And in case you have missed watching our past session or you want to rewatch it, you can visit our YouTube channel. I'll be sharing the link to our YouTube channel shortly in the comment section. So let's get started and gain some expertise and insights on this evolving topic. Over to you, Vishendra.
Thank you, Ritika. Thank you so much. So I'm going to, today, in fact, we are privileged to have a panel of sales and marketing leaders who have mastered the art of enterprise deal. And let me introduce each one of them. Let me invite Sanjay. So Sanjay is the head of TCS Banks for capital markets and wealth across US, Canada, UK, and AI at Tata Consultancy Services. So Sanjay doesn't just speak the language of enterprise, he's fluent in dialect of million-dollar deals. He'll be sharing the secrets that have made him the go-to translator between tech innovation and C-suite aspirations. Uh, Let me invite Dennis now. So Dennis is this talk dog, and he's also the funnel flip artist. So he's the founder of Romus Numbers, and he's the Michelangelo of sales and marketing strategies. He's here to show us how traditional sales and marketing funnel can be turned on its head, creating a flywheel that doesn't just attract customers, but also creates a gravitational pull for enterprises. Now, let me invite Dean. So, Dean is an outsourced VP of Sales and Advisor at Sales Acceleration. Dean is David to the enterprise Goliaths. He will reveal how he is arming SMBs with the precision and power to take on the big leagues and win. So I formally welcome all of you here, Sanjay, Dennis, and Dean. Before we begin, do you want to say a word to the audience?
Go ahead, Sanjay.
Yeah, no, thank you for this opportunity, Vish. It's a pleasure. It was a pleasure doing the last one, and it's sometimes when you have spent so much time in industry, it's as important to give as much to take. And in these opportunities, you get to do both, right? You get to take a little with this esteemed panel. You get to learn a lot, but you also get to give a little. So I had a good time, and I look forward to a great session today.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you so much.
Sanjay, the philosopher. We always like doing business with him. Hey, Vish, in case you forgot, and our audience doesn't realize, it actually says LinkedIn Live number 22. What does that mean, number 22, Vish?
So this is the 22nd session that we have this time. We begin these series of session in the year, I think, 2022. And we are going to be covering 2 years on these series. So we have covered a couple of sessions, and all these sessions done it together with Dennis. Dennis and me, we have been there. Dennis, me, and Ritika, all three of us have been there on all these sessions. But yes, we these sessions have been very inspiring and interesting when we have leaders like Sanjay, Dean, who are joining, and then you have Dennis, who is kind of guiding you on various aspects of the thought leadership that is required in the industry. So,
well, congratulations.
Dennis, would you like to add?
Yeah, Vish, congratulations, 22 in a row. I understand you and Ritika are in the back office at the same time working up a treatise or a compendium of some of these. Is that right?
Yes, we are. We are working on a compendium. We have built one ebook on qualifying leads. That's on the base of the session that we had, and we are in the process of working some more books on the basis of 2020X vision with AI, and then also in terms of various sales and marketing strategies that have been discussed and shared by our speakers in these sessions.
Very nice, very nice. All right, hey Dean, go ahead.
I greatly I appreciate being included again, Vish. I think this is my third time. I did drop the ball this last time. If you recall, I said I'm going to wear a white shirt with some very colorful suspenders so I can look more like my good friend Dennis. And I dropped the ball on that. So next time you will see me in suspenders.
Awesome.
So, Dean, you strike me as a guy who may also wear a belt at the same time. Are you a suspender and belt guy, or just suspender?
It depends on what weight I am. I like to fluctuate in the weight. So sometimes I have to have a belt.
Yeah. And, you also mentioned about a beer or coffee.
Exactly. I'll stick with coffee at 9 a.m. Probably a little safer that way.
Yeah.
I told you guys earlier in the green room, I actually worked at Budweiser one summer while I was in college. Now imagine this: you go into the cafeteria at Budweiser, and beer is free, and milk and soda you got to pay for, but beer is free. What are you going to pick? Right? You're going, oh, I'll have a milk. That's $1. I'll have a beer. Oh, that's free. They probably changed the rules since then, but that's the way it was.
Nothing like beer over cereal, right, Dennis?
Well,
right.
it is
So,
made from oats. It is made from oats.
Yeah. So
all right,
for
Vish,
the
let's
audience, this time we have aimed to keep this more like a conversation, not too much of slides or having a monotonous talk, but we are going to have more of an interactive session. While we have put a structure to this entire session, if you look at the agenda that we have shared on LinkedIn earlier, but here on this on the slides, we have structured in 3 sessions actually. So the first one is the Enterprise Whisperer, Secrets of $1 Million Deals. This will be taken by Sanjay. So Sanjay will talk about how to decode the DNA of a successful enterprise deals. And when you look at some of the facts or stats from the industry, multi-million-dollar deals may represent only 20% of total deals, but they can actually contribute to 70% of revenues, and that is what we have seen even in many large enterprises. So Sanjay will show us how to land these game-changing contracts. Then we are going to have Dennis who take us from funnel to flywheel, which is in terms of reinventing the enterprise journey. So he'll talk about how to create compelling narratives and communicate effectively with C-suite executives. But if you look at the stats in the industry, and that's what's shared by Gartner and McKinsey, 70% of buying decisions in complex B2B sales are based on how customers perceive a company's ability to solve their problems, and that is very much relevant for enterprise deals. So if the solution is not tailored to the enterprises or to the decision makers, then the chances of signing the deal gets lower. Then we are going to have Dean, who is going to talk about the SMB slingshot, catapulting into the enterprise arena, and he will share tips for smaller companies selling to big ones. So small businesses often struggle with enterprise sales, but those who succeed can see an increase in their target market and may also have revenue growth for some segments increase to 20x to 30x. So there's a critical area for SMB or startups who are into B2B tech domain. And then we may probably have a Q&A discussion. But if you have any questions for the speakers, please add in the comments box in LinkedIn event page, and we'll pick those questions and ask the questions to the speakers. So let's begin with some bit of context on enterprise deals. So when we look at these enterprise deals, I see building an aircraft as a metaphor for these complex enterprise deals, because it's kind of, if you have to build a capability to fly safe in the skies, it involves a lot of processes, multi-stage of design and manufacturing. There are multiple stakeholders who are involved, and then you need to have a lot of patience. So in fact, if you look at the stat that I've shared here, the production lead time for an A320 is approximately 1 year from the first piece manufactured to delivery. So, and if you look at the final assembly of wide-body Boeing 747, it used to take 45 days and involve over 6 million parts and 150 miles of wires. So you can see the kind of complexity which has been involved when you are, manufacturing or building an aircraft. And the last one is the Airbus 380, is made up of 4 million parts from 1,500 companies in 30 countries. So that highlights the stakeholders who have been involved in building an aircraft. So much like these integrated aircraft, enterprise deals involve numerous components, stakeholders, and a significant investment of time. They require careful planning, precise execution, and the ability to coordinate many moving parts. So as you navigate the complex skies of enterprise sales, remember that patience and attention to detail are crucial. And when you are a sales leader, your role is similar to that of an aircraft manufacturer or a pilot combined. You must meticulously build the deal and then skillfully guide it to its destination. So with this metaphor in mind, let's explore how experts approach the complexities of enterprise sales. So let me now invite Sanjay to kind of share his thoughts in terms of what an enterprise deal is all about.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Vish. So I think first of all, a great metaphor, and I'll try to build on that and try to relate so that it's easy for people to understand. But I'll say a few things that I wish that the enterprise deals could be made as fast as a 320 Neo, which is in 1 year. I wish, right? The second aspect is that it's not about building an aircraft and flying it. Enterprise deals often involve changing the engine of the aircraft while it is flying, right? Now imagine doing so. That's the complexity. It's not about, I wish it was as easy as building an aircraft, but it's actually about fixing the plane while it is flying, right? That was one definition that was given to us. Again, I'm going to keep going back to my area of expertise, which is financial services, banking, investment banking, wealth, and that area. Often, an enterprise deal would involve the change of a core system, right? A system that touches every dimension of the enterprise, or it impacts. Even if it doesn't touch, it impacts. But most importantly, it impacts the customer, right? So whenever you look at enterprise deals impacting the customer, immediate a sign of caution, a red flag pops in every executive's mind, because they do not want to disrupt the client experience, right? They do not want to disrupt the client experience. So, and at the same time, they want to improve the client experience, right? So you will start noticing that in enterprise deals, a lot of these mutually contradicting situations are there. I want to elevate my offering, but I don't want to disturb the status quo, right? So that's the complexity. The second point that you mentioned very correctly is it involves a lot of different stakeholders. So it's not just about different parts of the enterprise getting touched. It's also different parts, different people in the enterprise getting touched. Now, an enterprise deal or any sales process, you have to always remember, we think we are selling it to a bank, but you are actually selling it to an individual, right? And the more the number of individuals involved, more complex and difficult is the sales process, right? It's not that they don't want the enterprise to deliver better products and services, but it's that their view of how to create a more revolutionary product or reimagine something is different. Their point of view is different. Their destination is the same, but the journey that they imagine to the destination is different in many ways, right? So there is this other element of the enterprise deal. The third element that usually comes up with enterprise is how to fund it, right? Now, if the goal is at an enterprise level, it becomes sum of multiple goals, right? Sum of multiple goals, and more often than not, the lines of businesses, they will be more focused on what do I get out of it, right? Why should I be contributing? So budgeting becomes a very big challenge, trying to convince what portion of the enterprise program should be funded by my LOB. How much of chargeback is going to come to me compared to the revenue or benefit that my line of business is going to get, right? So there was a story about in a lot of American banks, even lending is a completely different line of business versus deposits and loans, right? And within lending, mortgage is a completely different business. Commercial lending is a completely different business. And in deposits, time deposits, savings deposits are completely different lines of businesses, right? So each one, and if you try to go and tell them, I'm going to sell you a core banking system that's going to modernize all the dimensions of the bank, it's very difficult to convince how much the lending business should contribute to the transformation program. How much should the deposits business should try to contribute to the transformation program? It's very difficult. So this dimension of how do I convince or get people behind is very, very critical. Even more difficult is how do I fund a program like this, right? So these are, in my opinion, some of the major challenges of an enterprise deal. But then the organization has often end up taking more often than not, the tendency is that why don't we take a shortcut and look for point solutions? So why don't we break down the program into multiple projects, and each one can go and choose what's best for their line of business, right? So the lending guys can go end up choosing, the deposit guys can go and end up choosing what's right for them, and then it becomes a multi-vendor situation, right? So instead of a multi-million dollar, hundreds of $1 million deal, the deal starts breaking down and into smaller opportunities, and then all of a sudden you find competing against not one but 10 different vendors who are not interested in the enterprise opportunity. They are just interested in the small piece of the opportunity which they are good at, right? But you, as a large organization, like for example, the one that I represent has 650,000 people, and we can do things that 10 different vendors put together can do, right? So how do I compete with not one, but 10 sort of guerrilla vendors who are specialists in those areas, right? They may be master of their domain, but the benefit is, their benefit is that will provide faster point solutions, but I am looking at a solution that will strategically transform that enterprise, right? And there, this whole metaphor comes in, right? Which you brought about the 747 or 380, which has 1,500 suppliers. Now you're competing against 1,500 suppliers versus. So there was this nice thing that the Ford CEO said, right? I can never compete with Tesla, right? Tesla presses one button of upgrade, and hundreds of thousands of Tesla cars all over the world get upgraded. The software in one button, they say, it's like iPhone, because every piece of Tesla is coming from the same vendor. They don't have a third-party supplier at all. Ford, on the other hand, has some 400 different suppliers and systems which don't even talk to each other. So if you're upgrading their dashboard for the mileage, the radio system can go bad. So we are the Teslas, right? These enterprise sales deals are effectively trying to saying that I'm going to simplify your organization. I'm going to touch upon these multiple dimensions of it. So the question is, how do we convince when each line of business has such competing priorities? They don't, I mean, for the lack of a better word, they don't care about the other LOB's priorities, right? It's not that they don't, it's just that for them, their priority is the most important. They need to fix their result, their KRA, their appraisal depends on what their business and line of business can do. So you have to understand that's how we operate. End of the day, I repeat, we are selling to humans. We are not selling to a bank where there is this altruistic group of people who are actually thinking about the organization. Actually, they are thinking about their line of business, right? So so how do we deal with it, right? I think we have described the problem statement, and I think most of the people who are there in the audience would be able to relate to this problem statement. So how do we deal with this? So some of the processes that we have followed is that actually you need to elevate the conversation, right? It is important to understand who will listen to your story. Well, if individual LOBs are not listening, then potentially you're barking in front of the wrong tree. So first you got to figure out which is the right organization within that bank which you should be talking to, where their KRA is tied to not the individual LOBs, but tied to the whole organization. One such organization, typically, which is becoming pervasive in most of the industries. Okay, and again, I know I'm talking from a banking and financial services standpoint, but thankfully, this organization is now becoming all powerful and all pervasive. And it has many names, but often it is known as the Chief Data and Digital Officer, responsible for the digital transformation of the organization, right? So more and more companies, effectively almost every organization is thinking of itself as a technology company. How do I drive my business with technology? And digitalization and control over data is becoming critical to growing business. So more organizations are trying to set up this office of the Chief Digital and Data Officer and digital transformation. They often report to the CEO, okay? And CEO wants that, they need somebody who gives them a big strategic picture as opposed to a individualized, isolated picture. So that is one organization that we have trying to reach to say, hey, listen, you are going to end up becoming another Ford, right? You're going to end up again solving the problem for the short term. Let's look at it differently. This is the organization where you need to quickly tell them about the big funding issue. Don't let the line of business fund these programs. You have to understand that these programs are better when they are funded at a corporate level, at the enterprise level. That you will see can be a big way where LOBs will start aligning, because now you're not pulling out of their kitty. Ultimately, it's the enterprise's money, right? As you're dipping into the same funding source. But rather than the enterprise distributing their budgets to the individual LOBs, they keep the budget with themselves for the large transformation programs and drive it directly from there, right? So those are some of the ways that we have found it to be very effective. And then percolating the message that how each of the LOBs are going to benefit, how each of the businesses are going to grow. That has been a very counterintuitive and the strategy. So and I'm going to finish this by saying, how do we do this? More often than not, the fear in our mind would be, am I trying to bypass a business head? Will he be getting mad? Will she be getting mad that I bypassed them and I went to the CDDO? Reality is they're not. Once you bring the story to them that this will solve their funding problem, this will solve their people problem, they actually want to take you to the CDO and help you present the story. So those are some of the ways that we have found this to be extremely effective and powerful.
Thank you, Sanjay. So I have a couple of questions.
Yes,
of course, you talk about Chief Data and Digital Officer.
Yeah.
While you see Chief Data and Digital Officer as the door opener for you, but you did mention, you did talk about some more senior officials, but you also see like CFO or Chief Commercial Officer, because when there are some industry studies that have been done, they're saying that instead of the growing practice is that business teams are getting more involved in these tech transformation deals than the tech functions itself.
First of all, I'll correct. I'll self-correct.
Yeah.
Enterprise transformation deals can never be a technology initiative. You should never ever sell enterprise deals as a technology exercise. This is not a technology modernization. It's a business transformation. So your pitch can never be about technology in these matters. Now, CFO you mentioned is fair, but you have to understand that CFOs can become very bean counters, right? Ultimately, they're chartered accountants, right? And with all due respect to them, they only care about dollars and cents. They tend to miss the big picture. So Chief Digital and Data Officer, because they're both reporting to the CEO, it's your conduit to the CFO. He has to become a conduit. Let them help you build the business case, right? And that can become the conduit to. So in these cases, when you're engaging with these organizations and you have the ears of the CEO, you can think about explaining to them as concepts like impact zones. Now, impact zones is basically a summation of these individual projects, if not done correctly, can stall the growth of the whole enterprise. And that could be the reason why these programs should be managed, controlled, and funded at a chief digital data officer level or something like that, as opposed to the line of business level, right? So again, I'll repeat, do not pitch them as technology modernization programs. You are going to lose the game completely, because then business thinks that if only technology is going to change and I'm going to get the same product and service, why do I even pay for it? My product is running fine. Important thing is to say is I'm going to give you power to launch new products and services that you've been wanting to do. I'm going to let you launch those products and services cheaper, better, and faster. So never pitch an enterprise deal as a technology modernization initiative.
Awesome. Okay. So any example or case study that you would like to talk about? You did talk about 4 impact zone. You want to give some real world example and elaborate further on these impact zones, and how a sales leader can kind of focus on such impact zones, which could help in terms of qualifying these enterprises.
Yeah. So I think again, I'll put the onus that more often than not, it is the responsibility of the sales leader, right, to be creating these deals. Now, you will have teams that are focused on various LOBs of the business. You may have multiple sort of client partners, sales relationship managers. They also have a very isolated view of the LOB. But the responsibility of creating such enterprise deals actually belongs to the head of sales, the leader. So the leader has to take the responsibility of identifying the dots. Each of your client partners, relationship managers are bringing these stories to you. But then you as a sales leader have to connect those stories together and present it back to the top of the house, right? Saying, you know what, I'm listening the same thing. This LOB A and LOB B are actually trying to accomplish which there is a lot of synergy in between them. So in a way, you have to help create these impact zones and present this message. See, you have to understand this. When a customer comes to you, they haven't figured out their problem. They haven't figured out their solution. They're coming to you for advice and solution. We may think they know their problem statement, and you have to carefully and in a very creative way tell them that perhaps you are struggling to even define your problem statement. That's where the sales leader has to rise up and use his personal, both emotional connect, personal connect, and a business connect to say, hey, you know what, let me provide you my perspective. I respect what you're saying, but hear me. And then those becomes eye-opener, and then suddenly you, from a salesperson, you become an advisor to the CDDO. So I have this favorite statement which I say, to sell is not to sell, right? You just cannot sell these deals. You have to, given the mind share, your value proposition has to appeal that, okay, this is something that can change my business. You will never be able to sell these deals. You have to earn these deals by winning the respect, trust, And suddenly the CEO or the CDDO has to realize that, this guy is actually thinking about my business, right? So those are some of the ways we have been very successful in doing this. And there was one
Thank you, Sanjay.
example
Yeah.
where the chief operating officer of this LOB line business actually took me, saying that I want to introduce you and present. And at the end of the meeting, I'm just telling you, she held my hand and the word was thank you. That you have solved. I couldn't have funded this deal myself, but with your help, we are able to now fund the deal. So those are the kinds of outcomes that suddenly makes you feel, oh my God, this is the job is so worth doing.
So then your role changes from vendor to a trusted advisor or a partner.
Absolutely. You cannot be a vendor and selling enterprise deals. Don't see yourself as a vendor. First of all, don't even see yourself. If you see yourself as a vendor, then it becomes us versus them. Then the product becomes your driver. You will keep selling the product. And they will say, what is in it for me? You sell a solution that solves a customer's problem. This is your problem. This is the solution. Product is simply a means to that end. Product is the least important thing, right? The product for me, TCS BaNCS, is the least important thing. Most important is the solution. And how do I get you the solution? Product is simply the enabler. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Sanjay. We'll come back to you. I think Dennis or Dean may have more questions, but maybe we can. You talked about narrative and the value proposition,
Sure.
value sharing. So maybe we can begin with Dennis.
Thank you. And that was great. Sanjay, very nice. I remember when I was servicing Wall Street, as you are now, and depending on the amount of revenue a line of business was making, would dictate how much power they had in the company. That was classic. And I had two customers. One wanted a solution that only ran on DB2, and the other guy wanted a solution that only ran on Oracle. I mean, and they said, I do not care about anyone else in this company. If DB2 and Oracle are required, each guy wanted his own. So anyway, nicely put. All right. So just a few things, Vish, that I'd like to go through with the audience today. Okay. Are you doing that or am I doing that, Vish?
Both of us.
Okay.
So now you can control this thing.
Thank you, Vish. So, everything I do is about researching the marketplace, researching individual public companies to figure out what's the best companies to go after, which ones we should avoid, and what kind of messaging should we be developing that's business-based that will get those corporations to pay attention to us. Okay, so that's the commercial. Now, Vish asked me to cover a few things, which I'm going to do quite quickly, from funnel to flywheel and reinventing the enterprise journey. Also, I'll introduce the concept of narrative selling and then end up with the digital breadcrumb strategy. All very cute names, but they're all legitimate strategies now in the market that are recognized. The first one being the traditional funnel looks like this. Now, I deliver an entire class that the funnel should actually be turned upside down. So fewer records go in the top that result in bigger deals at the bottom, as opposed to 1 million records go in the top that produces some number of smaller deals at the bottom. But I'm going to skip that from right now. But that's kind of been a historical, and it's linear, going from top to bottom. Most people associate this kind of a arrangement as marketing as a job. And when marketing sort of gets to the end of its job, sales will take over. It's kind of a linear frame. But in a flywheel, it's circular and continuous, and numbers of entities inside the vendor community are operating in collaboration to make the most of getting inroads into the target companies and to ingratiate themselves. I'll tell you a quick story. I mean, you folks aren't going to believe this, but that's how old I am. So when I started in computers, I went to work for Ross Perot, who headed up EDS and eventually ran for president of the United States. And he told us, all of us were in dark suit, white shirt, wingtip shoes. You know, he told us, look, you make the client dependent upon you. You make them get to a point where they can't live without you. Imagine in New York when they have a garbage strike, the sanitation people go on a strike. The garbage builds up on the street, and people will do anything to solve that problem. So his advice to us is you want to ingratiate yourself so entirely that the customer feels they can't live without you. It's a little over the top, but you get the idea. And the flywheel is a concept like that. We are attempting to address the enterprise through multiple touch points, all working in tandem with each other. This might be actually a good way to show it to you as well. So many years ago, I worked at Ford Motor Company building engines for Mustangs. And as those engines came down the line, you had a certain space in which you had to get your job done. And then the next engine would come along. If anyone's ever seen the Lucille Ball skit where she's trying to eat chocolate bonbons on the chocolate assembly line, you know how funny that could be. Well, that's not the way it's done anymore, right? We know that, Vish, because now it's like this. This is how an engine gets built. Multiple robotic arms all working simultaneously to get the product out the door. All right, so that's sort of like the flywheel approach. The next one is the narrative selling. And I did use a very old picture here with the intention of conveying how true this story is from the beginning of time, right? And in our world, it's not Homer or the Iliad or the Odyssey. The customer is always the hero of the story, not the vendor. And the vendor is actually not a vendor, as we heard very appropriately from Sanjay. These are trusted guides on the path to success. And you can see this vendor didn't spell success correctly, but we'll leave that on the table for a moment. And it always starts with a problem defined by the vendor, hopefully, and ratified by the customer. I think we've all recognized the legitimacy of the expression. If you can define the problem, the better you can define the problem, you're halfway or 3/4 of the way to the solution already. And that problem statement is absolutely crucial in order to make sense of the narrative selling. And narrative selling creates an emotional connection. Every exec at any bank, let's take a bank as an example because Sanjay's been talking to us about that. Any exec at any bank is going to expect the vendors to be really buttoned up on their logic and numbers. They may get confusing because the vendors do their best to make them look better than everybody, but the narrative selling actually creates an emotional connection. And I think Sanjay took us through a very powerful example like that. So, and the last is like an Aesop fable or a parable. A narrative allows for a very complex subject to be communicated much more simply than otherwise would be the case. Narrative selling. And now I'm just going to move on to the last one. Digital breadcrumbs as a strategy. So getting the C-suite attention via carefully placed, informative, engaging touch points are called for so that we're bringing the client along through constantly delivering value. Now, that may be a white paper or a Gartner report. It may be something that our company wasn't even involved with, but we're continuously presenting to the client information that would be relevant, let's say, to Sanjay's example, again, to their particular line of business. So the mortgage guy isn't going to fund the transformation, as Sanjay told us. It's going to be funded ideally at the corporate level, but you not continuously, you're going to be don't bum the guy, but providing mortgage thought leadership would be well advised because it's helping to build a loyalty inside the shop. And these are just some of the examples that one can employ to get this to happen. And it's a continuous process. The breadcrumbs are there to continue to elevate the story. And I picked on the straw that broke the camel's back. That's not a delightful metaphor, but you get the idea. At some point, you win the deal. At some point, you actually win the deal by incorporating so much of this activity in your approach. Okay, Vish, I wanted to go over that. We'll probably have some questions later. I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Dennis. So I'll just have one question, because you talked about some of the breadcrumbs, and Sanjay did talk about what information the customer needs, especially the C-level. So I felt there's and you in your previous sessions you did cover some of this information which has been collected from their financial reports, or data from analyst reports, primarily in terms of the business growth and financials. So do you see that financials actually can financial data can be used as breadcrumbs for C-level, when you have a kind of a narrative selling, and whenever if you want to talk about the impact of the transformation, I think they might be looking at how it's going to impact our financials the most. So do you see that the financials as the digital breadcrumbs as part of C-suite nurturing?
Thanks for that, Vish. Yeah, just very quickly. So the financials have extraordinary and outside impact for a vendor that's willing to take it up full-throatedly and use that approach in their go-to-market. It's extraordinary how much impact it can have. And that's true because it's a almost lost art. While equity analysts do this for a living, enterprise salespeople are often less adroit, less knowledgeable of it. And so it doesn't play a very predominant part of the selling equation. I always give this picture. The first slide is, let's take Sanjay. I'm from TCS. TCS is terrific. Good morning. All right, that's the first slide. The second slide is the income statement of the institution that you're calling upon. That snaps the room to attention. No vendor has ever presented the income statement of the institution you're calling upon to them. It separates you into a completely different selling ladder, because that puts you in the advisor column. Now, the last thing I want to say about it, imagine an Excel sheet. And on the Excel sheet are the numbers that are important from the financial statements: income statement, balance sheet, cash flow. So let's say there's 20 numbers for Bank of America, same 20 numbers for Mellon, the same 20 numbers for Chase, the same. And you look at that spreadsheet and you go, it's obvious that one of these institutions is killing it, and one of these other institutions is in serious difficulties in this particular area. That forms a large part of the narrative. You can actually see the numbers. You're going to satisfy the CFO side of things, you're presenting to them, and that can be the narrative story. We're not trying to get to slay the one-eyed cyclops. We're trying to get the bank to be more profitable. And why do we want the bank to be more profitable? Because the people at the C-suite get their compensation from how well the stock does. Never forget, all companies, Ford, American Can, Budweiser, no matter, they're in the business of making money. They may make cars or beer cans or beer in order to get there, but their whole point of existence is to make money. And getting the C-suite to buy into what you're describing better have a theme that's going to improve the financial performance of the bank, because that eventually leads to the bank stock price going up, if you will.
Thank you. Thanks, Dennis. So just a quick question to Sanjay as well. Dennis did talk about financials and narrative selling. I think we lost him. Okay, then let me go quickly to Dean. We'll come back to that question, Dennis. You did comment that salespeople usually do not actually go to these financial reports before they approach or before they have an interaction with the C-level. So actually wanted to check with Sanjay in terms of where's the missing point. But let's move to Dean. I think SMB does have a strong interest in terms of understanding how enterprise deals can be cracked. And while Dean has been coaching some of these small and mid-sized businesses, so let's hear from Dean in terms of what he has to share. Dean, over to you.
All right, excellent. Do you have the slides up, Vish?
Yes, I'll add. No, I don't have the slides. You'll have to share those slides from your end, Dean.
Okay, I'm not seeing them here though.
Yeah, sorry, Vish. I don't know where the system dropped me off. So
You actually dropped at the right time. It was a question because I was asking. Dennis made a comment saying that salespeople do not use information from financial analyst reports normally in their conversation. So how do you where do you collect? What kind of information do you need? What are the gaps? What are the missing links, especially from marketing, sales, and marketing perspective that you see? What are those marketing messages or marketing assets that are being missed? And
right. No. This point about financials is extremely important. First of all, I mean, you being on top of their results, you trying to understand that in your 10K, your CEO noted this. In your 10K, your CFO noted that. I think more than the analysis which they understand, it tells them that you have really done your homework as well. So there is another dimension of how much have you researched. Are you coming and selling me what you have, or are you coming to come and solve my problem, right? So that research has a dual connotation. One is factually understanding what you want to do, but then you're also sending a message that I have really worked hard and thought through before I have come to offer you something, right? So there is that. But coming to the marketing point, I think many a times some firms make a mistake of, which I repeat, trying to hard sell a product and focusing on the features of the product, which take most of the marketing collateral, saying my product can do this, my product can do this, as opposed to the problem that the product is going to solve. So I this is my favorite part of it. I just don't care what your product can do. So I'm going to keep coming back to that dimension. So marketing teams have to focus more. Most of the questionnaires that I get for brochures are focused on, tell me the top three things that your product does, right? I said, most important, tell me the top three problems your product can solve, right? So I think there is that disconnect where marketing teams are also in love. Our product people love our products because they built it. You love your baby. They're like, it's like a baby to them. And marketing teams want to promote. So I think there is this small gap that needs to be overcome, and that instead of focus on what I have versus what it can do for you, right? So that's I continue to see that, despite all the efforts, and it's pervasive. It's across not just one organization, across all organizations. I read brochures from our competitors as well. I think we are all making the same mistake.
Right. Yeah. No, you made that point, and I think the product marketing is actually very pervasive in small and mid-sized businesses or even startups, because their entire business is built on product. If they are not selling or they are not marketing their product, they won't be able to get their foot in the door. But now let's hear from Dean. Dean, I can see your slides.
All right, excellent. Hey, good morning. I think as Dennis and I always share, we like to drink a lot of coffee. So I think the last one we did, I was sitting in Augusta. So today I'm not sitting in Augusta, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say go Dogs. I am sitting in the heart of SEC football and loving the season. But today, and I really appreciate the slides that you picked, Vish, because the theme of this really is what I'm dealing with every day. And we're talking about scaling the summit from SMB to enterprise. And this would just be one example, because what you're going to hear today is about generative versus reactive and building a predictable and repeatable process. If you don't do that when you're climbing from SMB to enterprise, you will fail. This slide here is one I thought it was pretty cool, but my wife grabbed my slide deck this morning, and I'm like, I thought she really loved it, because we had a family vacation where you had the Denali's on Mount Denali, right? So I kind of looked at it as, imagine the number of people that climb out in Denali that don't make it. Heart attacks, falls, and the length of time. Or you can go with a repeatable, predictable process, which is you drive up to Talkeetna and you get on K2 Aviation and you simply fly up onto the top of the glacier about Mount Denali. So when I talk about making sure it's sustainable, if you want it to be scalable, you have to be sustainable first. And, the one thing when my wife grabbed the slide deck, what she was worried about was she on the right side where she wanted to be in the photograph, and was her hair correct? So it's kind of comical. I thought I'd spilled coffee on my slide deck or something. In terms of the SMB slingshot, this one should be frightening. This is a survey that's the state of sales for 2024. And when you look at the number of businesses that are talking about the areas where they're struggling and they need help around sales strategy, sales methodology, sales analytics, KPIs, or the sales organization, these are all things that must be dealt with to make sure that you have that predictable, repeatable process. Because again, if it's not sustainable, everything in place, it's going to be very hard for you to grow and to grow quickly into a scalable direction. The one area, and I really like this when you picked up this, the David and Goliath, when you start thinking about the competitors, this is probably one where it is overlooked greatly in the SMB space, but also going into the initial parts of the enterprise. And when you start thinking about the competitors, I mean, everyone knows who they compete against. That's not a concern. But you have new competitors and a lot of change that rapidly can, change. So when you need to look at the company, you need to really get into your competitors with the product services. Probably most importantly, you need to look at your own unique proposition of where do you fit? I mean, how do you position against your competitors? How are you going to work with those customers and truly add value? And it really kind of ties into your unique value prop as well. But so many times you have a number of competitors with them constantly trying to revamp their strategy, and companies aren't adjusting. So I can tell you, when you're getting into the larger competitors, this is something you have to be in front of. One that I really enjoy and was the Trojan horse that you'd picked up, Vish. I kind of look at this as game changers. I mean, how do you get your foot in the door? It doesn't matter how you do it, other than you need to do it professionally. But, what can you do to help the clients? So when I start looking at some of the different technology or solutions or approaching, I'm constantly encouraging the customers to find a way. How do you better engage and have a customer engagement? How do you leverage AI, like with KnowledgeNet AI, to better relationship map and understand how do you find those right contacts to penetrate and to get in? But again, ultimately, these are all technology and/or solutions and/or creative sales strategies to find a way to simply get your foot in the door. And, when you really look at the leap and you look at SMB to the enterprise leap, I mean, you're really building that blueprint and framework for scaling the excellence. But in order to do that, you've got to really dive in and address every aspect of your sales strategy. There's so many different components that are there. The sales process and methodology. This is where I see most folks drop the ball, either there or on the people. And I can tell you the biggest challenge that I'm seeing in SMB, but the same applies to enterprise. We all talk about all the baby boomers exiting that are in that 60 to 78 year range. What people keep forgetting is it's not just the owners, it's other key employees. And on the sales side, you have a very aged, very tenured sales organization and sales professionals that really don't need to be managed. And I can tell you, when you're going from those individuals and that experience and that commitment and the loyalty between the company and the employee to the younger generation, and trust me, I have 3 children between 23 to 30, it is critical that you're onboarding them, you're investing in them, you're providing the training, and you're including them in your culture on an ongoing basis, because if they don't see that investment, so the newer generation, they are going to need to be managed. They're going to need to be trained. And a lot of these owners in a lot of the companies, and again, it goes from SMB into the enterprise, that is the other area where they're really struggling. So when you look at this piece, it's critical that you take the time and well document and build that strategic framework so that you can take that sustainability and make it a generative state for the future, so you do have for scalable growth. I bet you guys didn't think I could go through 5 slides that quickly, right?
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, very good. So in fact, I have a question, and because you talked about Trojan horse, and Sanjay mentioned about gorillas, right? So would you go with the definition of gorillas or Trojan horse, especially when cracking an enterprise deal, from a SME perspective? And you also talked about the age of the salespeople, right? So do you think that age actually impact your approach of Trojan horse or gorillas? So we can comment on that.
You said or gorillas. A good example. I was at an unbelievable event yesterday that Bruce Nelson and High Tech Dealer Services put on. It was a huge charity fundraiser that was all around supporting American Cancer Society, and I think we've all lost a number of loved ones to this nasty disease, and/or seen a lot of friends fall. And when I looked at the demographic of the group, there were hundreds of people there participating in the group. And it was interesting to see two things. One, a number of aged sales professionals who had restarted a second career doing similar or totally different aspects, right? So they were trying to leverage their skill sets or experience in an entirely new, path, if you will. But what I would say is I looked at the people that brought customers and had customers that were with them. And it kind of goes on with what Sanjay was indicating. These folks were going an extra level of including their customers and expanding that relationship on something that's more dear to us personally in our personal lives, versus selling to them. So I do think when you get to, and I'll say when I look at the gorilla part, I mean, the generative state is the most critical. And again, it really touches on what Sanjay said. And that is, if you do everything right and you earn the right, you don't have to be selling. I mean, if you're positioning it correctly, the customer, it's almost going to be like you're almost a little hesitant to ask for the order or going, okay, what's next step? You got to make sure you're asking that question. But if you've done everything right, you're going to position yourself where the business is just going to transition naturally on a path forward. And I think that really applies to SMB, but clearly it applies to enterprise and beyond. I mean, I think it's the new state, and it's not about the fancy bells and whistles and products and that selling approach. Those days, in my opinion, are behind us. It's about creating that meaningful relation and how can you impact their business and add value.
Okay, all right. So in SME business, like Sanjay did mention about they see chief data and digital officer as a conduit. And when you are in SMB, how do you get your presence built in the enterprise deal? I mean, whom you normally approach, or what is how do you land your SME business in an enterprise world? Whom would you connect with? Who is your go-to person in the enterprise world?
It's interesting because when you're doing SMB, and to me, SMB, let's call it 2 million to 100 million, you can make an argument what the right numbers are. I mean, you're dealing with the owner, the CEO the other leadership in all cases. And you're working with a number of other leaders. I think as you go upstream into enterprise, you're working with a whole host of additional influencers and participants that you've got to do the same thing to earn their trust and build the right, if you will. But ideally, I mean, you want to be as close to that ownership leadership. But again, as you scale up, it's going to be that much more challenging to have, I think, the same kind of face time you're going to have, say, in a $40, $50 million company.
Yeah. Yeah, you made a point. Sanjay, Dennis, do you have any questions for Dean?
No, I'm not a question. Comment. I think Dean makes a very good point here. See, you have to understand the size and scale and what you're selling. The tricks of the trade change. Sometimes if you are in a highly commoditized business like a used car or a bathtub, right? You have bath fitters here. Sometimes product is what sells, right? So I'm not trying to not trying to sort of trivialize the importance of the product feature. Don't get me wrong, but it's also about the problem that it's also how much, what will you say, what can we are talking about beer, right? What can you say, which problem can it solve? It doesn't solve a problem, right? It just gives you a kick. Allows you to have a good time, right? So don't underestimate the power of the product itself. And I think Dean made another good point here is that in this SMB, right, which are proprietary owned and founder owned, and these may be true for a lot of companies. I know a lot of audience from here are from India and others. It continues to be that a lot of corporations are still family run. Although they may be listed, they may appear to be professionally managed. And I don't want to name names, but even the biggest corporations in India can be family influenced. So do not underestimate the power of the owner. Do not underestimate the power of the product and its features, but blend in this element of the value creation, right? So I just wanted to leave that correction so that people don't say, you know what, my product is the least important thing. It is very, very important, but blend it with these other things as well,
Right. Thank you. Thanks, Sanjay. Dennis, you had the point as well.
I wanted to actually ask you, Vish. I think Dean did a very admirable job. Vish, give us your perspective on a couple of these things, would you, before we finish up?
Sorry? I didn't get your question.
Yeah, give us your perspective, because you're serving a continuum of enterprises with your company. So you must have some. So I want to elevate you a bit here and let you share some of your experience, which you haven't had an opportunity yet.
From enterprise and SME perspective?
Yeah, whatever.
I think these two, so, these two are very different kind of ecosystem altogether. So especially when you have a larger enterprise or larger vendor or supplier, they have a lot of resources at hand, and they may have a lot of data, they may have a lot of insights, internal insights, or even connections, which an SMB may not have. They may lack these kind of resources. So the only resource that they have is their capability, is the way they can create value for that organization, or even for a smaller LOB. I mean, they need not target a chief data or digital officer. They may probably begin with an LOB and then grow or expand within that organization. So, and when you look at sales and marketing, of course, marketing, I believe, has a very critical role in both sides of both the scale or size of the vendors. But yeah, marketing has to work very closely with sales. At the same time, they need to have also a very good understanding of whom we are selling this product to or our solution to. So while sales at the same time, while in larger enterprises, you may have more mature kind of sales leaders, but in a small and mid-sized companies, you may not have that kind of mature sales leaders within the organization. And that's what Dean also talked about. That most of these organizations are hiring younger sales managers or sales leaders to grow their business. So there's a lot of training which would be needed by these people who are actually looking to grow in enterprise world. But yes, if you can crack an enterprise deal, then your revenue growth is going to be much higher. Your target addressable market is going to be much higher as compared to if you're only living with startups or small businesses. Because once you are there in enterprise world, you can grow much larger than what you can do for a small business. And third thing is your churn rate. Your churn rate is also lower if you have an enterprise customer. While in a small, if you have a small businesses as your clients, your churn rate may be higher. But when you are with an enterprise customer would want you to be there for long term, would want you to be part of their organization, and the churn rate for an enterprise sales is actually very low. So yeah, these are my understanding so far at the moment when I work with some of these enterprise and small businesses. Currently working more with the small businesses, helping them understand how to crack an enterprise deal. But yeah, hopefully I have addressed your question, Dennis.
Thank you, Vish. I appreciate it. So I know we ran long. Vish, do we have number 23 scheduled already?
Yes, in fact, we actually wanted to have a session, actually a panel discussion on Q4 sales strategies, but because of paucity of time, we are not able to have that. So we have planned our next session, which is on 15th of October, Tuesday, 15th of October. And that's where we are going to talk about Q4 winning moves, mastering sales, pipeline, clients, and team. Q4 is especially for geographies like US and Europe, or even in some countries in APAC. Their financial year is from Jan to December, and that's where the Q4 is very critical. While in India, of course, Q4, from a business perspective, financial year perspective, Q4 is Jan to March. But for other regions, especially considering the fact that most of the customers are based in US or Europe, Q4 is very critical, and that's where you would see a lot of sales push, building pipeline for next year, customer events, building relationship with clients, having some team team events. So some of these activities we are going to cover in our session on 15th of October.
Very good. I look forward to that. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Sanjay, and thank you, Dean, for sharing your insight. And thanks, Dennis. You have been, part of all these sessions that we have been having. But I'm sure our audience would have got insights in terms of how to qualify an enterprise deal. What are the various elements, like Sanjay talked about, stakeholders, funding is very important. So, and at the same time, how you kind of build your relationship within the organization through various LOBs, having a very strategic approach in these transformative deals. And while Dean talked about some aspects in terms of some strategies, especially on Trojan horse or the way a startup or as small and mid-sized companies revisit their sales organization, considering the fact that they are they are limited with resources. So I think those are very great insights that have been shared, and hopefully we hopefully the audience would certainly appreciate and can actually roll that out or implement some of these insights in their day-to-day activities. So thank you so much for joining this session, and we look forward to having you on 15th of October. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dennis, Dean,
Thanks,
and Sanjay.
Dennis, Sanjay.